Hello everyone, welcome back to day 9 lecture of how to learn DevOps and cloud computing in 60 days. So what are we going to learn as part of today's lecture? We are going to learn something called Jenkins pipeline, and we will also compare Jenkins pipeline with Freestyle job that we have already implemented. And there are three different type of pipelines. We have scripted pipeline, declared pipeline, and then multi-branch pipeline. We will create a scripted pipeline in order to implement CI/CD for a Java web application that we have already configured in our GitHub. So now let's try to understand the end-to-end CI/CD process flow diagram. You have a product owner who is going to create user stories after understanding the business requirements, and then development team would start picking up the user stories, and then they would be converting user stories into some kind of a code. They would be committing into any SCM tool. As soon as they commit the code, and then your CI/CD process kicks in. So the goal of CI is to identify issues early in the software development lifecycle. So that's the reason why we are integrating various code quality tools as part of CI. So we have created Jenkins Freestyle job in order to implement CI. So we have integrated with Jacaco for performing code coverage. We have integrated with SonarQube in order to identify bugs. We have integrated with Trivy for identifying any vulnerability issues. And then we have integrated with Nexus after building the WAR file, and then we have stored them in Nexus. And then we have deployed our application into Tomcat server. And then we send Slack notification back to the development team after the build is complete. So that is the CI, right? So basically the goal of CI is to have your deployable code ready after making sure the code does not have any major defects. As part of CD, once you have your deployable code ready, you should be able to deploy them into higher environment. So whenever you deploy your code into QA environment, for example, you can perform regression test suite. Let's say that you are working with that QA team. They are also automating the regression test suite. You can invoke the test suite after you deploy into QA environment. Similarly, you can also do that in the UAT environment as well. So whenever you move the code from one environment into another environment, you can also have key stakeholders in the approval process. So your goal of your CD is, once you have your deployable code ready, you should be able to deploy them into higher environment with some kind of a semi-automated process. The why I say semi-automated process is, so that is where the approval process kicks in. So that's your CD part of it, right? But when you actually take a Jenkins Freestyle job, you wouldn't be able to fully implement the CD part of it. So that is where you have to use something called Jenkins pipeline. That is exactly what we are going to learn as part of today's lecture. I hope this process is really clear. So now let's try to move on to the next slide. So when you take Jenkins Freestyle job, that has a lot of limitations, right? Because you cannot version control it. You cannot achieve complex tasks by creating Freestyle job. You wouldn't be able to even scale up. So this is mainly for beginners or simple jobs. So that is where you would go for Freestyle. But when it comes to pipeline, let's say you have very complex scenario. You have to have multiple stages. Sometimes let's say you also need to execute some stages of your pipeline in a parallel mode. Then you would go for something called pipeline. And once you write your pipeline code, you can actually store it in the version control system, and then you can also reuse for other projects as well. So that's a great thing about Jenkins pipeline. And you also have better error handling in Jenkins pipeline. So what are Jenkins pipeline? If you look at this diagram, this clearly articulates the Jenkins pipeline view, isn't it? So you have CI, and then you also have a CD. And you can create stages for each and every task that you are actually doing, and then you can write code inside the stages. So you have programmatic over control of your workflow. You're going to use a language called Groovy in order to implement your pipeline. So pipeline is one of the powerful features of Jenkins in order to implement both CI and CD. And you have three different types of Jenkins pipeline. You have scripted pipeline, and then you have declarative pipeline, and then you have multi-branch pipeline. We are going to focus on scripted pipeline as part of this lecture, and we will talk about declarative pipeline and then multi-branch pipeline in our upcoming lectures. So what is Jenkins scripted pipeline? So Jenkins scripted pipeline is nothing but it's a Groovy based pipeline as a code. So you're going to use Groovy in order to implement scripted pipeline code. You have to start with the node block, and then you would be defining each and every stage, and then you would be writing Groovy based scripting in each and every stage. And if you wanted to execute scripted pipeline only in the slave machine, you can have your syntax like this. So this is nothing but your slave label ID. But if you wanted to execute, either on master or any slave machine, then you can just leave node and then without specifying any label. All right, so now let's get started with the implementation.